and welcome to a new video. Today we're taking a closer look at a sneaky piece of malware called the Moon. So this nasty code targets something you use every day, of course your home router or your router, and any IoT devices, so that's Internet of Things devices that are connected and open to the internet for you to access, and then potentially other people to access as well. We'll basically break down how it operates, why it's dangerous, and then most importantly, how to protect yourself. So as you can see here, there's this article came out from bleepingcomputer.com in March 26. So a few of you might have seen this and start to panic that you're going to get infected, your router and everything else, because you've got an ASUS router and it says it's already affecting 6,000 in 72 hours. So just to put things in perspective here, this is probably going to be devices that are potentially end of life, so are not getting any updates anymore. And if your device is end of life, there is other firmwares out there that you could still install, like Merlin or OpenWRT. There's a few out there that if you just do some research, it doesn't mean you have to throw out your router by any means, because they'll probably still be perfect for what you need. But it's just there's some options out there. And also, just because your device is end of life, it doesn't mean it's going to be affected by this totally. And also, there is some good things that you can probably do to minimize and potentially stop any of this actually happening. Because sometimes these practices and how these things affect are not actually vulnerabilities, but sadly down to user area. Most of the time is where we put weak passwords, or we just put the user interface for the router open to the internet so anyone can brute force the password, or you use very weak passwords and things like that. So we'll just quickly go through what is the Moon. So imagine the Moon as a gremlin with a knack of breaking into old and outdated routers. So routers, those boxes that bring the internet to your home, sometimes get neglected. Just like old software on your computer, out-of-date routers can have security flaws that the Moon exploits. So think of your router as a central hub for all your internet activity. Everything you do online, checking your email, shopping, even streaming your favorite shows, passes through your router. If the Moon infects it, it's like giving cyber criminals a window into your digital life, so they can access everything that you're going through. So why target routers? So mostly is because you think of the router as your central internet activity, as we said, so everything you do actually does go through this. The Moon has a bigger purpose. It is part of a vast network called Faceless. So this is like a botnet. Think of Faceless as an army of infected devices secretly controlled by cyber criminals. The Moon goal is to turn your router into one of those devices. So basically turning into like a zombie device where they can, not necessarily they'll be looking at your internet traffic, but they'll be controlling it and using your internet bandwidth and things like that, and then the processing power of your router as well. So the Moon goal is to turn your router into one of those devices. This massive network lets criminals hire and hide their identities and carry out shady activities online without getting caught. Because when that activity actually takes place, it's basically going via your router, and of course by your router it's going by your IP address. How the Moon malware affects you. So it does a few things. So first one is the sneaky redirect. So the Moon can trick you. It can send you to fake websites that look like your bank or social media. The second you log in, it can basically identify where you want to go and then actually spoof that website. It can potentially use DNS spoofing. They can steal your passwords and personal information. So Internet Peeping Tom. So just like a nosy neighbor, the Moon can spy on your online activity, the websites you visit, the things you search for, even your private messages you send. But again, most of the time we've got to put in realistic is that a lot of internet traffic now is encrypted. So unless it's plain text and you're sending it just by normal HTTP, then of course they'll be able to see it. But most now will be HTTPS, as you'll see, just like banking and all nearly websites you go to. So all that internet traffic is encrypted. So it is harder for them to identify what you're looking and being, and actually people actually see your activity. One of the major things that you'll notice is that the internet's slowing down. So if you've ever experienced basically frustratingly slow internet, even with a good connection, the moon might be using your router as part of a massive attack to bombard websites with traffic, causing everything to slow to a crawl. So as we know, that's part of like a denial of service attack. And then also it's spreading the infection. So once the moon infects your router, it can try to jump over to other connected devices. And that's why we're saying like your IoT devices, where a lot of the smart plugs and things like that you can get cheaper now, might not have updates regularly for their firmware. So they're always going to have bugs in there. And they're in it, of course, with smart plugs and things, we have them in the house for many years. We plug them in, forget them, and we don't realize they're actually connected to the internet. So again, we have a look at, so how can you protect yourself? So basically the router, so you can first of all make sure if your router is older, then you can try time to have a look at seeing getting a newer model, but of course that's expense and you might not have the money to go and get one. But make sure you upgrade your firmware, you have a strong password. Perhaps you don't open the internet, your web browser, so accessing the GUI over the internet. So you can try and think of using ASUS Instant Guard so that you can get a VPN back and then access your router that way.
In a previous video, I explained how you can identify if you have an unwanted person or a hacker connected to your home network. In this episode, we're going to take a slightly different approach because after all, your home network will be more secure if you can prevent these hackers or unwanted people from connecting to your home network in the first place. It's like they always say, the best defense is, well, a good defense. So in this episode from Network from Home, I'm going to be walking you through the steps you can follow to secure your home network, and specifically how you can secure the router in your home network. I'll take the approach as if I'm just going to buzz through these and get to the router settings homepage, and then we'll walk through all the security settings that you need to worry about. The first thing we need to do, and it's singularly the most important thing you can do to secure your router settings, we need to make sure that you're not using the default username and password to access your router settings. As you saw with my router, I obviously had to set my own unique password when I accessed my router settings for the first time. But if your router has a default username and password that you're currently using to access your router settings, you need to go and change it. This is especially the case with older routers. So let's go in, let's make sure that we have a unique password for your router settings. Here we need to go into the advanced settings. From here, we're going to jump down to the system tab. And underneath that, we're going to select administration. As you can see right up top here, you have the opportunity to set a new password for your router settings. So let's just say I was using the default password for my router settings. Here's where you go and you type a new one. All right, we have a new password typed in there. Let's hit save to make sure these changes lock in. The next most important thing you can do is to take a look at the Wi-Fi networks that your router's broadcasting. So we want to jump up here to wireless. Here in your wireless network settings, you have the opportunity to secure your router in a number of ways. First and foremost is looking at the default Wi-Fi networks that this router broadcasts. These default wireless networks, they indicate the manufacturer of your router. You want to make sure you don't have your manufacturer or the model of your router in the Wi-Fi network name. That just gives the hacker an idea of what type of router you have. If there's a specific vulnerability for a specific router, they might be looking for that make and model because they know how to exploit it. So what we want to do here, we want to create unique Wi-Fi networks for your home. What I'm going to do for the 2.4 network from home to G, and then for the 5G, we're going to do the same nomenclature. Now we don't have any identifying information in the Wi-Fi networks. We're good to go there. The next thing we want to look at, obviously, is these passwords. These passwords were default passwords that came with the router. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you just change this to, again, something unique that only you know. So first we'll change the 2.4 gigahertz network. And then what we'll do the same password for the 5G network here. And these are both unique passwords. Ideally, you'd pick something a little more secure than secure password. This is just an example, but put in here whatever you want for your Wi-Fi network's password. The next thing we want to look at is the security of our Wi-Fi networks. Here, it might look a little bit confusing, but all of these are different algorithms and protocol for encrypting the traffic between your devices and your router. The one you want to select here, if given the option, is WPA3 Personal and WPA2 PSK AES. So the AES is the encryption algorithm that's used. That's the strongest one available. You want to make sure you're using AES. And the other one is the protocol that's being used. WPA3, that's the newest protocol, but a lot of devices still use WPA2. So that's why we have to have this WPA3 plus WPA2. If a device can't handle WPA3, it will use WPA2 and you'll be good to go. This will cover you for any sort of device that you have in your home with the strongest encryption possible. So we're going to select that for both networks. The next thing you see quite often when people talk about securing their Wi-Fi networks is they say that your Wi-Fi network is more secure if you hide it. So here you have the option to hide your Wi-Fi networks. I've actually made another video talking about hiding your Wi-Fi network and explaining how it actually doesn't make your Wi-Fi network any more secure. So I advise just you don't need to hide these for now. While you're in your network settings, if you scroll down a little bit, here you have the option to enable a guest network. I advise that you do this, so that way anyone that's visiting your home, they connect to your guest Wi-Fi network. So we'll be generous here. We'll enable a 5G guest network. Again, we're going to change the network name. We don't want the router's manufacturer in the network names. We're not going to hide the Wi-Fi network name. For security here, we're going to choose the same thing that we chose for the other two Wi-Fi networks that are broadcast, WPA2, WPA3 Personal. Keep in mind here for your guest Wi-Fi network, you want a different password than what you use for your other two Wi-Fi networks. If it's the same password, then you're basically giving your guests access to your other networks. You want to make sure that you're keeping these separate, so you want a separate password for the guest network. Once you have that locked in, you want to hit save. One thing to keep in mind is that when you change the Wi-Fi names that are being broadcast by your router, you have to go in and reconnect to your router's Wi-Fi network. So here we are, we'll go in, we'll connect to this Wi-Fi network. Network from home, we'll select the 5G, and then we'll type in the password that we selected for the network. Another thing I forgot to mention is that there are a few additional settings when it comes to your guest network that you want to make sure are disabled. In order to access them, you have to go into the Advanced tab. Under Wireless, see Guest Network. And here are the two things that I'm talking about. Allow guests to see each other and allow guests to access your local network. You want to make sure these are both unchecked or disabled. The last thing you want is for guests in your home network that are on your guest network to be able to either communicate with each other or to be able to access your local network, access your router settings. There's a reason you set up a guest Wi-Fi network, and that's because you want to keep those devices separate from the rest of your network. That's why you don't want to keep these boxes checked. The next thing we want to look at here is the remote management settings for your router. You want to make sure that your router is not publicly accessible by anyone on the internet, and you don't want people to be able to make changes to your router from anywhere other than your home network. So here we go into Advanced again. We go down to System. We go back to Administration here. Scrolling down, remote management, you just want to make sure that's disabled. Do not enable this because that way it will make your router publicly discoverable and potentially accessible if someone knows or guesses the password to your router settings. The next thing we want to look at here is WPS, or Wi-Fi protected setup. You can find that up here under wireless, WPS. WPS, it doesn't represent the hugest security risk because the window of exploitation of your home network is pretty small. I went into depth on this topic in another video, but just for now, keep in mind, if you're not going to be using WPS, it should be disabled in your router. If you're going to be using WPS, however, you should enable it for the short period of time that you're going to use it, and then you should disable it again. Again, not the hugest security risk, but I won't be using WPS, so we're going to disable it. The next thing we want to look at, it should already be enabled, but we want to look at your router's firewall. So under these advanced settings, if you go to security, firewall, here, it's just how we want it to be. The SPI firewall should be enabled. This basically is just another layer of protection when it comes to the devices on your home network. It doesn't let these random devices on the public internet connect to the devices in your home network. On top of that, the option for responding to pings from LAN. This isn't a huge risk. It's basically if you have devices in your home network, you want to make sure they can access your router. So you can get a little complicated. You can send a ping command to your router to see if it responds. You know if it responds that the connection is in place and it's working properly. That's why I keep this enabled. I trust all the devices in my home network and they pose very little security risk because I know what all these devices are. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure your router's firmware is updated. So here under the advanced settings, we go to System, Firmware Update. Next, we want to check for updates. All right, it looks like our router's firmware is up to date, but it's of critical importance that you periodically go in and you check to make sure if your router has any firmware updates. That's because a lot of these firmware updates, they provide patches for vulnerabilities that are found for your router. So for example, if your router has a known bug or a security vulnerability that lets a hacker take control of your router, what will happen is the manufacturer, TP-Link, will put out new firmware that patches this vulnerability. That's why you need to make sure you're updating your firmware. This is the one security setting that you need to periodically go in and check. It's not a one set and forget like the rest of these settings. You want to make sure that you build a habit of doing this every few months or so. On top of that, if your router has the option for automatically updating when new firmware is available, I suggest you implement that just so you don't have to worry about this. There's one last setting I almost forgot about here, but it's of utmost importance that we want to make sure that universal plug and play is disabled on your router. I thought by default it would be disabled, but in going to my router's settings, I find out that it's actually enabled by default. In order to get to these settings over here, we want to go to NAT forwarding, UPnP. As you can see, it's enabled here. Universal plug and play essentially allows your devices to open ports in your firewall. You don't want to do this unless you have a specific use case for it, and it's a little more complex. So for most people, you can just disable this and you don't have to worry about it. So let's do that now. All right, at this point, your router should be pretty ironclad when it comes to these security settings. If you have any questions about any of these settings, please drop a comment below. If you found this video useful and your router is more secure because of it, I invite you to like the video. That way it gets shared with other people who can benefit from this information as well. And lastly, if you like the type of videos I put out on my channel, I invite you to subscribe. That way you'll get to see every time I put out a new week.
discuss WPA. So WPA stands for Wi-Fi Protected Access, and this WPA is actually a security standard for wireless network devices. Not all wireless network devices, but Wi-Fi enabled wireless network devices. So Wi-Fi was given by Wi-Fi Alliance, and this is a website for Wi-Fi Alliance. You can see the details about that alliance. So first version is WPA, second one is WPA2, and then we have WPA3. So actually these all security standards were introduced to secure the
or manage a network for a large organization. Understanding these protocols is key to protecting your digital world. Let's dive into the evolution and key differences of these technologies. So, make sure you're connected and let's get secure. Let's start at the beginning. WPA stands for Wi-Fi Protected Access. It was developed quickly to replace the flawed WEP as the security protocol for wireless networks. WPA improved upon WEP by implementing TKIP, Temporal Key Integrity Protocol. TKIP was a significant upgrade because it used a more complex encryption key and changed the key for each packet, which helped prevent certain types of attacks that compromised WEP. Despite these improvements, WPA was only a stopgap measure, better than WEP, but still not perfect. It was susceptible to attacks such as the replay attack, where an attacker could intercept and resend data packets. As technology advanced, so did the need for better security. Enter WPA2, introduced in 2004. The major leap here was the adoption of the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES. Unlike TKIP, AES is a more secure and sophisticated encryption method, and it's even used by the U.S. government for securing classified data. WPA2 comes in two flavors: personal, also known as WPA2 PSK, and enterprise. WPA2 personal uses a pre-shared key, ideal for home and small office networks, while WPA2 enterprise uses a server to authenticate users, which is suited for larger organizations. While WPA2 was a big step up in security, like all systems, it's not without its vulnerabilities. As techniques evolved, so did the exploits. For instance, the crack attack, key reinstallation attack, highlighted flaws in the protocol that needed addressing. This brings us to WPA3, introduced in 2018. WPA3 addresses weaknesses in WPA2 with even stronger protections and introduces new features to simplify Wi-Fi security. One of the most significant enhancements is the implementation of simultaneous authentication of equals, or SAE, which replaces WPA2's pre-shared key PSK method. This protocol offers better protection against offline dictionary attacks, where attackers try to guess your network's password. Moreover, WPA3 also includes forward secrecy, a feature that protects past sessions against future compromises of secret keys or passwords. This means if an attacker gets access to your network, they can't decrypt past transmissions, which is a critical improvement. You might wonder, why all these upgrades matter? As our dependence on wireless networks grows, so does the risk of cyber attacks. Staying updated with the latest security protocols helps protect your personal information against potential threats. To sum up, each new iteration of Wi-Fi protected access has built on the previous to offer better security. WPA was a quick fix to WEP. WPA2 introduced robust AES encryption, and WPA3 has brought advanced features like SAE and forward secrecy to the table. So, what does this mean for you? Always ensure your network is using the latest security protocol available. It's one of the